year-old young man who came home from attending his first semester at Utah State. I'll be honest with you, I had about this much inclination to go on a mission. I hadn't really been thinking about it too much. And I came home, and I'd been home for about a day or two, and my bishop called me on the phone and said, "Kent, come on over. We need to visit. You're home from school, and it's so exciting, and I want to visit with you." And so I went over, and my bishop, bless his heart, was a very, very sweet, wonderful, kind gentleman that I truly adored. Just to give you a little preference on him and me, we became, literally, he became one of my best friends. I had cancer at the grand age of 16 years old and went through that wonderful process of radiation and chemotherapy, which makes everybody sick and lose their hair, and I looked like one of those little, prisoner of war camp victim guys, and he loved me better. I got to let you know, he loved me better along with my mother. But he called me into his office and he said, "Kent, the Lord wants you to go on a mission." And because I was obedient, he already had my mission papers filled out. And he handed them to me and he said, "I need 3 things from you by next week." He said, "I want you to go to the doctor and get a physical. I want you to go to your dentist and get your wisdom teeth out. And I want a signature on this page." And he showed me where to sign my name. And because I was obedient, I came home and I sent my papers in. My papers went in just before Christmas. During the Christmas vacation, the prophet of the church passed away. His name was Harold B. Lee. And Spencer W. Kimball was then made the president and the prophet of our church. I received my mission call the week after New Year's, and I know that I had to have been one of the very first missionaries called by Spencer W. Kimball. Isn't that cool? I went into the mission home. Actually, I was only 18 because my birthday came. And I went into the mission home the day before my birthday, and so I was one of the very first 18-year-old missionaries, just so you know. And I went into the mission home, and back then missionaries were better than they are today. The Grand Missionary Experience in the mission home, which is across the street from the church office building, we went in on a Saturday, and if you did not speak a foreign language, you left the mission home on a Wednesday. Isn't that pretty cool? I was that good. Okay? On Monday, because the way the church was back in those days, on Monday, the missionaries went fasting and praying to the Salt Lake Temple. We went to the temple on Monday because 90% of the missionaries that came into the mission home did not live in Utah. Okay? There were only 9 missions back then. That tells you or 9 temples. That tells you how old I am. And they didn't have an opportunity to go to the temple, and so they would come to the temple when they'd go through, and they would take out their endowments, and we went through 2 sessions. The next session they got to go through and think, "Whoa, that was really cool." But the neat thing was, brothers and sisters, is they took us up into the very top of the echelons of the temple, and there we sat in the solemn assembly room, and there, all dressed in our whites, the prophet of the church, President Spencer W. Kimball, came and he spoke to us. He said to us, "Oh, my young brothers and sisters, if only you knew who you were." And then he said to us, "You are the fathers and the mothers of the children who will be born and the grandchildren that will come in preparation for the Savior's second coming." I wrote it in my missionary journal. I only wrote 17 pages in my journal. I wasn't a very good journal writer. But I wrote it in there because I was impressed by what it said. And then I forgot all about it for 30 some odd years. When my son was called to be a missionary, in his mission papers it said, "If you have not done so, please go have your patriarchal blessing." And we went to get my son's patriarchal blessing, and this is the first line of his patriarchal blessing. Christopher David Allen, having authority of the Holy Melchizedek priesthood and being set apart as a patriarch in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I lay my hands upon your head and give you your patriarchal blessing. Christopher, You have been saved from the foundations of the earth to come forth at this time in preparation for the Savior's second coming. Now, brothers and sisters, what I want to say to you, because there's only a couple of you that are close to my age, and I'm the old fart here of the building, okay? You have to understand who you are. And you've been told that for years. And you have to understand who your children are. And you've been told that for how many years? Probably all of your lives. Now, a couple of years ago, actually it's been more than a couple of years ago, it's probably been close to 15 years ago, I was sitting in a meeting at the missionary department. My calling in the church, brothers and sisters, is I get to be a missionary. And for the last 17 years of my life, I've been working with missionaries, counseling with them. And the last 13 years of my life, I've been over all the early release missionaries that come home early in the United States and Canada. I've got a little over 3,300 missionaries that I love and take care of right now. Okay, it's pretty cool. Now, in one of those meetings, Elder Hinckley, President Hinckley's son, asked us, do you know why these young people were saved? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've been told a lot, and I know it's to come forth in the latter days. And then he gave us the answer, and I'm going to read it to you. For you women here, you may already have this, and I challenge you to give it with me. Here's what he said. We are daughters of our Heavenly Father who loves us, and we love Him. We will stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things and in all places. Now stop for 1 second, because there's the first reason you were saved. Oh. We are to stand as witnesses of God in all things and in all places and at all times. And as we strive to live the young women values, which are faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works, integrity, and virtue. Now listen closely to what we're going to say. We believe as we come to accept and act upon these values, we will be prepared to strengthen home and family, make and keep sacred covenants, receive the ordinances of the temple, and enjoy the blessings of exaltation. Isn't that kind of cool that that's why we were saved? Isn't that kind of cool why you were saved? And so today, what I'd like to do is I want to give you a little bit different vision of how to get your kids and yourselves, if I can be blunt, is that okay? A little bit more prepared and a little bit better to what we're really all about. Now, one more just a little cool experience that I had. I was sitting in another missionary meeting, and Elder Bednar came in, and he got to talk to us for a few minutes. And the first thing he said to us kind of disappointed me just a little bit, because, see, it was right after we let the missionaries start going out at 18 years old. And immediately, just so you know, the volume that changed, we increased the volume by 33,000 missionaries a year. Just so you know, you're supposed to go, wow. Okay? Back when I was a missionary, there was 12,000 missionaries. Okay? Right now, we rotate in and out in a year, processing in time. We rotate 139,000 missionaries in and out of the mission field in a year period. So what you've got to see is you've got to see that the influx of missionaries has gone on. Now, I want to dispel a myth that's going around the church, just so you know, because I'm the guy that gives the brethren the statistics, okay, about missionaries coming home. The statistics of missionaries come home has not changed, only 0.02%, and that percentage has actually gone down, not up, in missionaries coming home. In the 12 years that I've been doing it. But you see a lot of missionaries coming home, don't you? That's because we have a lot of missionaries going out. And the statistics and the graphs of my statistics, it shows that exactly as missionaries come and go out, Because here in another month, we're going to have a big flux of missionaries hit the mission fields, and it's going to go, whoa, okay? And in about 2-3 weeks from now, guess what's going to happen to my phone calls? And the little letters that I get from the church that says, hey, another missionary come home, you got to take care of him for us. And so it goes up, and it's such an amazing thing. Only 2% of our missionaries come home. 2%. Okay? 25% of your kids going to college will come home. They won't go back. Okay? 38% of men and women going into the military will drop out, and they don't come back. So understand that we've got a pretty good percentage. And so as you hear somebody say, oh, we've got so many missionaries coming home, you say, I know that that's not true, because the guy who gives the church the statistics on that, the brethren the statistics on that, it's not true. Now, I've got to tell you one more little statistic just because I'm proud of my kids. Okay, our statistics last year said that 39% of our young men and women coming home are really off their mission that are active in the church a year and a half later.
Yay.
Wow. The sad part of the statistics is because there's another group of folks that study their missionaries that come home after serving a full-time mission is only 60%. Guess what? My little wounded warriors are better. Now, the reason that we know they're better is because, I don't know if you guys know, is that every time you go into the temple and you scan your little thing, guess what we know? We know you went to the temple, and guess what my kids are doing? They're going to the temple and they're using their temple right commands. And we know that, and we can keep the statistics on them that way, and it's so pink and easy, and it's so sweet. So just to let you know. Now, back to what I was going to talk to you about today. What I would like you to do is I want you to see a picture, please. Okay? And those of you that have gone to the temple, and those of you who have not gone to the temple, I encourage you to do so. But the temple ordinances and the endowment that our Heavenly Father give you is a gift. It's an endowment. And what He's trying to teach you, brothers and sisters, is He's trying to teach you what He does. And understand that He does things on a great big scale, huge scale. Okay, I don't remember how many gazillion galaxies there are out there, but they say they're innumerable. And He has all of them populated, and things are going on. And what happens to us when we go into the temple is we go in, and He gives us an opportunity to do exactly what He's doing in a very small embryonic state. And when you go through and you're married, understand that now you become the gods and the goddesses of your own little world, and He's now given you 5 covenants that if you learn them and you follow them and you teach them, will change the way you look at the temple. It will change the way you look at life, because He's going to tell you, if you start to try to do these 5 things that I'm telling you to do and get everybody does them and then your family to do them, guess what you're going to have? Okay, and that's what happens. And so let's talk about them for just a few minutes. Okay, the first ordinance that we talk about is called the law, okay, of obedience. And the law of obedience, understand that Heavenly Father has that, and He gives us the law for 2 reasons. Number 1 is that He doesn't like chaos. Okay, He doesn't like chaos, and He likes to have order. In your homes, guess what you ought to try to do? You ought to try to have a little order. Okay? And when He does the law of obedience, realize that He's given us these laws and these commandments, and in a few minutes we'll even talk about a few more of them. The very first thing, brothers and sisters, that you really need to do is you need to be able to have laws in your own home. And you need to teach your children to be obedient to the laws that you have given them. Now, my belief, brothers and sisters, is that you don't need to have 8,647 rules. In the Allen family, we had 7. That's all. We didn't even get to have 10. We just didn't need them. And as we got the children to live the rules, all of a sudden things became smooth and they became easier. Does that make sense? And so what it does is it teaches the children, it teaches them to be obedient. It teaches them to also be obedient to laws and rules that they're going to encumber and have in their lives throughout the rest of their life, and those are the laws of the land. It teaches them to be obedient also gives them the opportunity, number one, to exercise agency and to keep their agency. Does that make sense? And we want them to have it. Now, we're going to slip next into the law of sacrifice. The law of sacrifice states that you will sacrifice everything you've got to defend the kingdom of God on earth. Now, the kingdom of God on earth, brothers and sisters, is what? No, it is not the church. It's the family. It's the family. You're going to sacrifice everything you've got to building up the what? The family. I live in a home, and this will be weird to you, I live in a home that for the last probably close to 25, 26 years, maybe longer, I live in a home where I have no needs. I have no needs. Okay? I have those no needs because what I have is I have a family that is constantly looking out for me, and guess what they're taking care of? They're taking care of my needs. Guess what I'm trying to do? Okay? I'm trying to take care of their needs. And as we've taught our children, and it's such an amazing thing because I have two daughter-in-laws. My son-in-law is just kind of brand new into the family, and I know the day will come that he'll come to me. But I've had two of my daughter-in-laws come to me and to my wife, and they said to us, "Thank you so much for teaching your boys to love us and to take care of us." Now, as my wife and I discovered this little concept that I'm teaching you right now, that to sacrifice, you're taking care of the needs of the family, we worked hard in our home to develop ways to teach our children to serve and to sacrifice. Okay, my wife did two really big, important things. Every Sunday, it wasn't Fast Sunday, every Sunday she would hand each one of my children a yellow sticky, and she would hand them a pencil, and during the sacrament they were to sit and they were to think and they were to look over the audience and they were to look over the congregation of our Lord, and they were to write down 3 people's names on that little sticky. First of all, she wanted them to learn how to try to get some inspiration. The second of all, she wanted to see how many times it comes that all 3 of my children would write down the same names. She would then gather up those little slips of paper, we'd take them home, and the top 2 people or families that's names were on our list, we did what we called the Phantom Fuzzy. Okay? Now, in the old days, doorbell ditching, I don't know what they call it anymore, but we would go and we would make treats and we would doorbell ditch every Sunday in our ward. And we did that, brothers and sisters, for years. Okay? We only know that we got caught 3 times. Now, I want you to picture in your mind, though, where we live. We do not live in a city. We live in the country. Okay? My children, in the wintertime, would cover themselves with sheets. They learned to take doggy treats to some people so they could throw the doggy's treats so that they could slip in. And we would park it so nobody could see. And they would go up and they would doorbell ditch and they would go hunker down in the snow with sheets over them and they wouldn't get caught. Okay? There was one family in particular that we were afraid of, and bless my son's heart, he went and borrowed his friend's Grinch costume. Now, you got to look and see there's about a 300-yard road that went down to their house, and here goes my little son skipping as the Grinch down the road, and he goes in and he dings the little doorbell, and all these little kids come out, and they scream and they yell, and the dad comes out, and he hands him a plate of cookies. Okay, that was a cool thing. But guess what my kids learned to do? They learned to be sneaky. And they learned to serve. They were learning to sacrifice. They were learning to serve. In our homes, for years and years and years and years, this started when our children were small, we would have them draw a name out of a hat for a member of the family. And all of us participated. It wasn't just them, it was us. And we would try to do something. We were their secret servant, is what my wife called it. Secret servant for a week. And they would do little things for their siblings. They would make their beds. Okay, they never shined shoes and they never ironed their clothes, but they would make beds and they would leave little treats and they would do things. And the reward was is if you don't get caught, then we gave them the giant candy bars. Okay, not these little dinky ones, the giant candy bars, the dollar ones, the 79-cent ones from Maverick now, okay? Now, it's really funny because we went and we did all of this for years and years and years, and it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and all my children are older. Okay, most of them are as older than you guys, actually. Okay, and we were talking about this, and I said something to them. I said, you know, it was so amazing that you guys never got caught. And my oldest son says, duh, Dad, we didn't get caught because we wanted the candy bars. We weren't going to tell anybody. Okay, but guess what they learned how to do? They learned how to serve. Now, I got to tell you just a little interesting story. Because we're driving home, or I'm driving home one day, and I'm coming around the dam to go to my house, and I look out into the field, and here's 2 big trucks. My boys have they're Dodge people, okay? One has a big black one, and the other one has a big gray one. And I come around the corner, and here's my 2 boys out on the field with their trucks and my trailers, and they're hauling the neighbor's hay. And I drive along, and I'm thinking, what are they doing out there in that hayfield? And Wayne, the neighbor that they were hauling his hay for, was not there. So I went home, okay, changed my clothes, went back to help them. And what I discovered is that Wayne had left to go out of town. They heard it was supposed to rain. The guy that come in and takes care of his field went and bales his hay, and nobody was there to haul it. Now my sons, in their desire to help, had gone to his barn, and to get the hay in the barn, they had to pull a tractor out of the barn. They went in and they put the hay in the barn, they pushed the tractor back in, and they left it. Now Wayne comes home 3 days later, and all of the hay in his field is gone. He calls the cop. Okay, now the cop just happened to be another guy in our ward about 4 or 5 houses down from Wayne, where Wayne lives. And he says, Wayne, have you checked your barn? Well, no, why would I check my barn? Well, maybe you might want to go look in. And the guy got in his car and drove off, and Wayne went in and found out that his hay was done. But the blessed thing is, other than you folks here and the cop, guess what? Nobody knows. Nobody knows that my boys went over and did that. What you're doing is you're teaching your children to do what?
Serve without recognition.
Without recognition, but it's called sacrifice. That's what it's called. And when we sacrifice, what happens to us, brothers and sisters, is we become edified. And that's what you need to be able to teach your children to do. We live in a generation of children that have more self-portraits on their phone than they do of their friends. We live in a world of selfies. And it teaches them to be selfish. Selfishness leads to decay and to destruction. Now, a little secret for all of you parents. In our research on love and respect, you cannot love someone and respect someone that you do not serve. If you want your children to love you and respect you, guess what you got to get them to do? To serve you and to serve their siblings. Make sense? Okay, let's go to step 3. Step 3 is called the law of the gospel. Now, don't know if any of you know what the law of the gospel is, and so if you don't, I'm just going to tell you. The law of the gospel is this. Okay, when Jesus, just before he was betrayed and crucified, was sitting at the dinner, and he had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they were trying to tempt him and try him, and they were trying to trip him up and get him so that he would fall, and then they could go and accuse him of certain things. And one of them came to him and said, what is the greatest law and commandment? And the Savior said, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it, to love thy neighbor as thyself. And upon these 2 commandments hinge all the laws of the prophets. And the law of the gospel is then what? To love God and to love thy neighbor as thyself. There's actually three things there. I want you guys to think for just a second in your minds, please. Your closest neighbor lives where?
In my house.
At your house. When my kids lived at home, I'd have to go down the hall and past the bathroom just a little bit, and there was my daughter's room, and she was my next closest neighbor after my wife. I'd have to go all the way down to the basement to get to my next closest neighbor. Now, I want you to think about a concept here. In your lives, and don't say if you did, but you have to know that in the Allen family, I have never yelled at my neighbors. I've never yelled at my neighbors. I've never kicked their children's little butts. I've never done any of those terrible, horrible things to my neighbors and my friends. But when my neighbors are sick, guess what I do? We make homemade bread and soup. And when they're gone, we pick up their mail and we pick up their papers. And when they're gone, we feed their dogs and their cats. And when it's going to rain, we go hook onto the trailers and we help them haul their hay. And we're doing things with them all the time. With your children, you need to teach them to what? To do the same. To love their brothers and sisters like they would their friends. Now, in order to do that, you have to provide a vehicle. Is that okay when they tell you that? You can't just expect them to love them. Now, why do they love their friends so much?
They don't live with them.
It's not just because they don't live with them, it's because they what? They do stuff with them. They don't just play video games with them, but they do stuff with them. And so, brothers and sisters, find ways that will create positive emotion that your children can do things with one another and laugh and giggle and have fun and become best friends. My children are best friends. My two boys work together. They have a construction company and they work together and they are best friends. Okay? They will tell you that. My daughter, they love their sister with all their hearts and might, and they do everything they possibly can to be with them. And so it's one of those things that you have to do, but you got to create an atmosphere and an emotional place that they can have positive emotions doing fun stuff. And if you got more boys than girls, boys have to have more adventurous stuff than going shopping. Okay? For you mothers out there, you may not need to learn how to shoot guns. And you may need to learn how to drive them in their cars and get gray hair. And like a few of us that are losing our hair or lost your hair, it'll happen to you a little bit, ladies, but you've got to find things that they can do for that. Does that make sense? And you'll go forth and you'll do. Okay, the fourth thing. Okay, the law of chastity. Back in the old days, before I understood what God was really trying to teach me, okay, I didn't understand how the law of chastity fell in, or, come into these covenants that we're making. I thought, well, that's kind of weird. It just goes down this thing, and we've got all these gospel things, and then bam, just one of the commandments all of a sudden. What you have to look at, my brothers and sisters, is that God started way back at the beginning, and one of the worst things that has ever happened throughout history of time has been when people break the law of chastity. And with your children, and you start when they're young, okay? As you start when they're young, you dress them what way?
Modestly.
Modestly. I can guarantee you that if you got the little spaghetti strap things on your little girls, by the time they get to be teenagers, guess what they'll still be wearing? They will still be wearing those things. But most importantly, with your children, you have to look and see what we're bringing into the home. What are the things they're reading? Especially, what are the things that are on their phones? What are the things that are on their computers, the games that they're playing, and those various things? Now, just to give you an idea of reality, okay? The average age for children being introduced to pornography is 7 years old. It's 7. They have a full-blown addiction by the time they're 8 or 9. Their little brains and their little bodies do not know how to think through and process those addictions, and those addictions become bigger and bigger and bigger. Now let me just tell you how it happens. It happens because they will go over to their friend's house, because I know none of you allow any kind of bad movies in your home. So let me just share with one of the little girls in my ward. I was her primary teacher. She went over to the house next door to play. It was a rainy day, kind of like right now. It was about this time of year. And her little friend, and they went over to play, and then because it was raining, the mother said, "Why don't you guys go down and watch a movie?" So they raced on downstairs to watch a movie, and they flipped on the TV, and the TV came up with an HBO. And I don't have those kinds of things in my home, so I don't really know. But the reality was, is they sat and they watched a movie that showed what we as therapists call soft porn. Okay, that little girl went home that night after watching that movie, and she was, wow, that's really, whoa, yeah. And she went and she stole her mother's tablet, the little tablet, and she typed in boobies. And guess what she found? Hardcore porn. Guess what she did the next day? And guess what she did the next day? And she had been doing that for about 3 months when her mother went in one day and found hardcore porn on her thing. Now she's got 5 boys. And guess what she did to those 5 boys? They are in big trouble. But the reality was is the 5 boys wasn't the one doing it. And the one little boy who she thought was doing it, the little 14-year-old who she thought was doing it, he said, "Mom, go in and look at the dang time. I'm never here. I was with Dad when you're telling me that I was watching porn." And she went in and she looked at the time that was on the history, and it went, whoa. The only one that was home was Alexa. And she went to her little girl, and guess what she found? "Yeah, Mom, I've been watching." Okay, and it took us about 6 months to get her off the addiction. You've got to watch, brothers and sisters, what's coming into your home, and you need to be able to take all of those precautions. There's a wonderful book that I suggest. It's the only one that I suggest on pornography. It's a little bit, when you get it, you'll think it's a little bit on the pricey side because it's going to cost you $25, $26 to buy it. It's called Good Picture, Bad Picture. And I would encourage you all to buy it and read it with your children.
What age?
Okay? 5, 6. Okay, read it with your children because I guarantee you it's going to come. Yes?
The church has a video that's based
Oh.
on their website.
They do. I just barely watched it. Thank you for bringing that up. The church has a video on their website that's based upon the same principles. And it's a simple book. And when you find that your children are watching porn, because guess what you're all going to find? That you're going to find that they're there. Okay? Don't be surprised and don't be angry. Love them, help them, and get them so that they will know that we can talk about it and we can help. Does that make sense? Now, just to show you how big it is out there, all right? About 9-10 years ago, I got the bright idea that we needed to really find out about our missionaries because I had a bunch of missionaries that were coming home and they were being sent home because of their addictions to pornography. And so I got the brethren to agree to send down to Provo right here at the MTC, and we did a little survey. The little survey was very simple. It had elder, sister. It has, have you ever been addicted to porn or masturbation? Then we said, when was the last time you watched porn or masturbation and masturbated? And we had little things that they could click off within, 3 weeks and 6 months and a year and that sort of thing. And then we had a little thing that said, do you still have an issue with pornography and masturbation? 98% of our young men, no, excuse me, I take that back. 92% of our young men said that they currently still had a problem with masturbation and pornography. 78% of our sisters had a problem with it. Okay, in my practice privately, I now see more young ladies having a problem with pornography than young men. Okay, it's a scary world. And so please, 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 Be very aware and be very open with your kids and talk. Yes, ma'am?
We also need to be aware of books that they read.
Yes.
Because that's where a lot of girls are introduced to.
Yeah. Books, magazines,
Is this book appropriate for teens or is it too?
no, it's all the way up. Okay, it's all the way up, and yes, it is a little bit young for teens, but it opens the door so that we can have those conversations. And that's what you need to be able to do, is have the conversations. And as you have the conversations, then things are done. Now, can I do a little side trip? Would it be okay? Yes, ma'am.
I just looked up the book on Amazon, and there's actually on Kindle, it's only $9.
Oh,
And there's a Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior by the same author.
yeah. And so those are for the juniors, for the younger kids. But it's a good book. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, can I teach you a little concept? Okay. When Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, if you'll remember from your reading and studying your scriptures from going to the temple, you'll remember that Adam and Eve took the fruit, and then Satan came in, and Eve says, yeah, I know who you are. You're Lucifer, who was kicked out of God's presence for rebellion. And immediately they hear the voice of the Lord that says, let's go down and visit Adam and Eve. And let's give them further light knowledge. And immediately Satan said to them, quick, hide. Oh, what do I want to hide? The Heavenly Father, He's coming down. No, you need to go hide. Well, why? Because you're naked. Heavenly Father doesn't want to see you're naked. Let's go. Here's some leaves. Put these over there. Okay? Satan teaches us to hide. Now, Heavenly Father comes down and He teaches us 3 times in a row. Whenever Heavenly Father does something 3 times in a row, guess what we really ought to do? Pay attention. Okay? Here's what He does. He comes down, and the very first thing He does, He goes, Adam, where art thou? Where are you? Well, I'm over here in the bushes. Well, what are you doing in the bushes? I'm naked, and I didn't think you wanted to see me naked. Oh, who told you was naked? Now listen to what Adam does. You know that woman? You know that one you gave me? You know the one you told me that I was supposed to stay with? She gave it to me and I ate it. Okay? Now, He's teaching us. The very first thing that Heavenly Father did is He come down and He asked a question. And do you really think Heavenly Father didn't know where Adam and Eve were? He knew right where they were. What He was doing, brothers and sisters, is He was exposing the secret. Okay, He was exposing the secret. Now, He also shows you what men do and what teenagers do. The first time you confront your children and expose the secret, guess what they're going to say? You know that friend? You know that one that I was with? He had it on his phone. It wasn't me. And he looked it up on my phone. It wasn't me, Mom. It was them. Okay, the reality is they're going to act just like Adam. Don't be surprised. Heavenly Father didn't yell and scream. Did you notice that? Then He turned to Eve and He said, what is this thou hast done? Oh, He just exposed the secret again. And then she says, Lucifer begot me and I did eat. She was very straightforward and said, yep, I did it. And then He said, Lucifer, what are you doing here? Okay, Heavenly Father knew what Lucifer was doing there. That was part of the plan. Lucifer was dumb enough to not think it was part of the plan, but it was part of the plan. But He exposed the secret, and then immediately, do you know what happened? Lucifer was kicked out. Okay, unless you expose the secret, guess what you cannot break? You cannot break the habit, the addiction, the sin. A concept. You've got to learn it. You've got to grab it. Okay? Now, we've got to move on because we're getting way behind. The very last covenant that we were taught to make, and I appreciate so much our keynote speaker yesterday afternoon. He explained it perfectly, but I'm going to give you one more little piece of the law of consecration. The other piece of the law of consecration is that the Lord wants us to be prepared. He wants us to understand that life is hard. He wants us to understand that there are going to be trials and tribulations in life. And when we're prepared by what? Consecrating and doing everything we can to give, and also to consecrate our things that we have, that when the tough times come, brothers and sisters, when the tough times come, that we will have something to draw upon to take care of us in the tough times. Now, I'm going to throw a new twist on this, just because I can't, and I can do that because I was asked to speak today. The one thing that I would add to your list of things to put into your love consecration, to put in your storehouse, are memories. Memories. Elder Packer, for years and years and years, I counted 11 years in a row, in his conference talks, he talked about creating memories. And I want to show you now how it works. And if I can just tell you a couple of little stories. Back 100 years ago, okay, I was a little 13-year-old boy. The state of Utah finally passed a law that said that anybody 12 years and older can go hunting. My family was a hunting family, and guess what I wanted to do? I wanted to go hunting. My father was one of those kind of guys to make us so that we really wanted to hunt, would never let us go, only when you got to the right age of 15 could you go, and I got to go when I was 13. Now, I want to paint you a little picture. It was an October morning, okay, and we were hunting pheasants, and it rained all night long. And I slept in the upper part of the camper, and the rain hit on the thing, and I was so excited. I know I didn't sleep any at all that night because I was so excited to go. And just before we went, my grandfather came up to the house, and he was an old guy. He died at 98, and he was old, and he came up and he gave me this little 410 shotgun that held one shell. And I had my little shotgun, and I actually slept with it that night. Okay, and we got up the next morning, and because of the opening day of the pheasant hunt, you have to wait until later in the day. The hunt is later in the morning. You can't just go out to the first light. We got up and we had breakfast, and there was all of our friends, and it was fun, and it was exciting. And 9 or 10 o'clock, whenever the time came, rolled around, and all of a sudden we could go hunting. And I remember the magic of walking out across that field, and our dogs were going, and the hunters were all strung out, and we went across the first field, and there was no pheasants. But we got to the edge of the field, and there was a great big drop-off, and then there was another field. And as we got to the edge of the drop-off, we looked down, and brothers and sisters, there was a tractor that had tipped over in the field, and the wheel was still going around. I remember as a little child, my dad and my bishop and another man running down, and my brother that was there, and their brothers that were there, and they all run down, and there was this little man trapped underneath the tractor, and he was a kind of a grayish black. Brothers and sisters, I remember my dad laying his hands upon that man's head and promising him that he would live until assistance could be given. And then I remember as 3 men and a couple of boys lifted the tractor high enough that my brother could drag him out from underneath the tractor. That man lived. I remember as a little 13-year-old boy, a month or so later, receiving or having my dad read a letter at dinner time from this man that we had saved, thanking him for the blessing, and then telling us that he and his wife had been called to serve in a mission of the church. Guess what kind of a memory I have, and what kind of memory lasted with me for a long time of the power of the priesthood. Now I'm going to jump you forward. I had a little boy. We're going to go a little bit longer. I had a little boy that loved God, and he still does. We moved our family, we took off, and we went to Alabama, and in Alabama, they don't play the sissy sport of soccer, just so you know. In Alabama, it's baseball and it's football, and my children were small, like my wife, and we didn't want them to play football, but my boys wanted to play baseball, and so we went down to Walmart, and we bought some gloves and bats, and every night I would pitch to them, I would play catch with them, we would do everything we can, and my boys learned how to play baseball, and they loved it. My oldest son caught on very, very quickly, and he could catch the ball, he could throw the ball, he could hit the ball. He played shortstop on his team, the little league team. My other son, the one that loves God, not quite as good. He could throw the ball and he could catch the ball. But when it comes to batting the ball, he couldn't do it. And we would practice over and over. We spent hours. I bought one of those little balls that you swing around your head and you get them to try to hit it until my arm fell off, but it did go back. And then we went to the batting cages. We went to his coach's house. Nothing we did could we ever get Chris to catch or hit the ball. The end of the season came, and it was our very last game. We had only lost one game. We were now playing the team that beat us before, and we went through the game. The end of the game came. We were down by 3 runs. We had 2 outs, and guess who came up to bat?
Oh, gosh. Someone's gonna hit it. It's a hard one.
You're going to ruin my story. Now, have any of you as parents sat in the stands, and when your son comes up to bat or your daughter comes up to bat, you hear everybody groan? That happened. We had a man on second, we had a man on third, and my son came up to bat with 2 outs. I said a little prayer. And the first ball came down. Chris watched it go by. The next ball came down, and the coach had yelled at him and said, "Swing for heaven's sakes," only he didn't say heavens. Okay? And Chris, being the obedient child that he was, he swung even though it was over his head. And then strike 2. And the next ball came down, and Chris hit it right over the first baseman's head. Went right down the line, and he drove in 2 runs, and he's now on second base. Our number 1 batter comes up to bat, and guess what happens?
He struck out.
No, he hits a home run. And we are the winners. We won the game, and we are now tied for first place. On the way home that night, as we got done having our little party over at Shoney's, that's where you go down south when you want to have a party, is you go to Shoney's, and you always have Coke, even though Coke is the root beer Coke. And we went to Shoney's, and we had our little thing, and everything was great and fine, and we're on our way home, and I said to Chris, "Chris, do you know how you hit that ball?" And I was expecting him to say something like, "Yeah, Dad, I finally got it. You watch the ball, and it comes down, and you swing at the right time." Chris didn't do that. He just says, "Nope." Nope. And I said, "Chris, I think you hit the ball because I said a prayer for you, and Heavenly Father granted my prayer." And he said, "Okay." And that was it. We now play for the championship because we're tied. And I know this will sound strange to you, but same scenario, only just a little different. We are not tied, we're down by 1. We have 2 men up to bat, and guess who comes up to bat? There are 2 men out. Guess who comes up to bat? It's Chris. And what happens, brothers and sisters, is the very first pitch, and he pops it right over the second baseman's head. And he drives in the home run, the runs, and we win the game. And guess who the hero is?
Chris.
It's Chris. At the party later, everybody on the team signed the ball, and my son has a ball when he was 9 years old of all his teammates because he's the hero. That night as we're going home, and I said to Chris, "Chris, that was amazing. How on earth did you do that?" He said something very simple. He said to me, "Dad, when I knew that I was going to have to hit the ball, I went over behind the tree and I said a prayer. And I know that Heavenly Father answers my prayers." Guess what Chris now has? He has faith, and he has a memory of God answering prayers. It was something that simple. Now, I'm going to bump you way up. Okay, my son is now 19 years old, or 18 years old, just graduated from high school. I just came home from a wonderful fishing trip because I let all my children, when they got done with their high school, that they could go anywhere they wanted in the world, and I was blessed with 2 sons who just wanted to go fishing with Dad. Then I had a daughter that came along and she went to Europe. Okay, but we came home off our fishing trip, and as we came home off our fishing trip, I used to raise horses, and we came home home, the man who raised the hay for our horses called and says, come get your hay, and we went over to get the hay, but on the way there we stopped by, my wife, she was a contractor, we stopped by their yard to pick up a big trailer so I didn't have to haul hay in a pickup truck. And while I was there, my brother-in-law, who was my wife's partner, came out and grabbed my son and said, could you come help us move some hay and such, and so they did. And not some hay, but some lumber, and as they went around the back of this yard, my brother-in-law was driving a big forklift and it had a bunk of plywood on it. And as they went around to put the plywood down on the ground, my brother-in-law hit the wrong lever and dumped the plywood onto my son, and it crushed him. It come down and he missed his face, but it crushed him. We didn't know it at the time, but as the time went through and we ran to the emergency room, as the first thing we got there, the very first thing my son said was, Dad, I'm scared. Would you give me a blessing? Brothers and sisters, it was a very, very short and sweet blessing. Please bless the doctors that they'll know what to do. Please bless them that they'll find out what's wrong and that they might be able to fix it. And it was over. A little while later, the doctor comes in from the emergency room. They'd run a bunch of tests, and he says, I can't find anything really wrong with him. He should be okay. He's going to be bumped and bruised and broken and all of those kinds of things. And then what they did is they give him a prescription, and they were going to send us home. And what I didn't realize at the time, that my son said later that he remembers it, and so does my wife, I screamed at the doctor and says, I don't accept that. I want a second opinion. And I don't know if you've ever gotten into an argument with an emergency room doctor. They are just a little bit above us, okay? But I got in an argument with the doctor. And he says, well, who do you want? And I had been a bishop with the head surgeon at the time of the KD Hospital. I was a bishop and he was a bishop, and our offices were the same. And I said, well, I would like Dr. Alder to come and see my son. And he immediately came in, amazingly immediately came in. Within minutes after they called him and he came in, he ordered an ultrasound and found that my son was bleeding internally. But it wasn't a lot. And he went and he left. He says, we're going to send him up, we're going to watch him, and when I get done today, we'll come up and we're going to go find out what's really going on inside. No sooner had we gotten my son up, could we close those doors in the back for just a second? No sooner has my son gotten into the room, when Dr. Alder again showed up and he walked in, as we were outside, as they were getting him ready, and he walked right back out. He says, your son is in crisis. And immediately we watched our son wheeled out of the room as they ran down the hallway. Some nurse handed me some papers so we could do an operation. And at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my son went into surgery. 10 o'clock that night, Dr. Alder comes out. And he comes up to me and he holds me and he said, Kent, I'm so sorry. Your son cut his liver, he crushed his liver, he crushed it completely in half. There's only 3/4 of an inch up at the top where it hooks in that has remained intact. We've pumped 31 units of blood into him. We can't stop the bleeding. Your son is going to die, and if you'd like to say goodbye, now is the time to do so. Now, my wife and I and my older brother, who was not active in the church, went in. And we laid our hands on his head, and in a simple little blessing, I blessed him that he would be able to stay, if it was the Lord's wishes, until his patriarchal blessing was fulfilled. To make a long story short, brothers and sisters, my son came home 2 weeks later, and a year to the date, he left to go to the MTC to serve his mission in Argentina. Memories. Memories, brothers and sisters, is what holds us together. It's those memories of those wonderful things that happen to us under God's watchful care. Now I testify to you. Number one is that God loves you and He knows you. You have a Savior who loves you and has done everything possible to love you and to help you in these hard times. I promise you and to know, and I want you to know that Ken Allen knows that we have a prophet on the earth And that through the prophet Joseph Smith, he gave us the priesthood and he gave us the sealing ordinances that seals families together forever. Right now, brothers and sisters, the Spirit is here, and you know that. You can feel it. It's bearing you testimony that what I'm teaching you is true. And I bear that testimony in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
What do you do for those that have
Thank you.